All right, hello everybody. Well, welcome to Share the Bytes. I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Jack, from the Berkeley Linux Users Group. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Ian.
Yeah. So today, I know you're going to be talking to us about Android, and I've got to tell our listeners you have the creator of SquirrelCam, probably by far the best Droid app there is on the Android market, Droidian Music, and arXiv Droid. I was wondering, could you tell us, at least introduce these programs you've written to start out with?
Okay, so the first one I wrote is by far the shortest of my Android apps is SquirrelCam. And this actually started off as a web project. It was, we kind of had an extra webcam sitting around the office, and we also have a squirrel's nest outside of our window at work about every spring, so there's little baby squirrels that are pretty exciting. So we set up a live webcam that uses actually a Linux project just called webcam-server. And that basically just sets up like a Java applet type webcam feed that we first had going. And basically sort of my friends and family really sort of got into the SquirrelCam and were watching it sort of nonstop. And then I would get emails whenever the camera went down. People were upset. And so I decided that this would be a good idea for my first attempt at an Android app. And it would be something that I could sort of, since I'm a big fan of Android and an advocate of open source in general, I think this would be a nice exclusive Android app that I could use to sort of, get my friends and family interested in Android devices. And to be honest, it's probably the type of app that wouldn't have been accepted in the Apple Store anyway.
Yep.
So, yeah, and then after having finished this app and being generally well received, I went to do some more serious ones, I guess. And the next one I tried was eMusic app for Android. So eMusic is a site that I like because, as far as I know, it's the only place on the web available where you can get DRM-free audiobooks. So of course, everyone knows about Audible, and there's a huge audiobook store available. But it's a bummer because all the files are DRM. So if you cancel your membership or you move to a different device, who knows if you'll be able to play those files. Whereas eMusic has just completely just plain old MP3 files, and they actually have a lot now, over 10,000 audiobooks. And they're also actually well known for being like sort of an indie music store on the web. And so I thought, this was another example of something that I wanted to just personally use for Android. And it's another perfect example of something that would not be allowed in iTunes. In fact, there's a forum thread about people just begging eMusic to make an iTunes app, but the problem is that, one, there's no SD card on iOS devices, and you can't, no apps except iTunes are allowed to basically import music into the library. And so, this was, I thought, another great example of an app that I could use to, both make something cool for myself to use and also to show off what Android could do that, iTunes, mainly just because of Apple's decisions, couldn't do. And then the final one was this arXiv Droid is basically something that I use for my own career, I guess. So I'm actually a physics student, and the arXiv, which is spelled ARXIV, the X is supposed to be like a Greek letter chi, is basically a place where you can publish your papers for free, and then anyone can read them for free. So it's kind of like open source papers, I guess. So often people publish their papers to the arXiv, and then will then at the same time submit it to some peer-reviewed journal. And so this app basically allows you to search the arXiv, see what was new every day, which is basically how people in the field follow what's new and happening. And then you can also download the articles and share them and stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, very cool. It's a lot of work there, but it sounds like a lot of fun. So, I was wondering, how did you get started with Android? So you decided to make SquirrelCam. Did you just jump right in? Did you find books? Were there tutorials that you were able to get your hands on to get started?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you just go to, I think it's developer.android.com, maybe. I mean, you can get started really easily. I mean, you could download the SDK for free, which works great on Ubuntu. And it's really actually just kind of fun. I mean, even if you're not a developer, just download the SDK and you can just sort of kind of play with the different Android versions. Like Gingerbread was released and it's already available in the SDK. It's not on most phones yet. So to get started, you basically just go to developer.android.com, download the SDK for whatever system you're on, Mac, Linux, or Windows.
And there's no registration fees, and you don't even have to own a device in order to develop. You can run it in their emulator.
Yeah, that's what I think is one of the most fun things with this. You can basically just, without having to put your name down anywhere, just grab the SDK and start running.
Yeah. So, yeah, it really does open it up to developers. In fact, that you could just download the SDK, download the emulator, write an application, and put it on the market without even having to invest in additional hardware.
So when you do want to put it on the market, you actually have to pay a one-time fee for your first app, $25, which is, in my opinion, probably a good thing because it's not nearly as high as the Apple fee, but it basically provides a minimum barrier so that we don't get more crappy apps than are already on the market.
Yeah. I mean, there are some brilliant 10-year-olds out in the world, but you don't want all of them just submitting code that all it has is a button that doesn't do anything.
Right, or yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
but to get started, you don't have to pay the $25 fee. You can develop your app, and actually you can even get it on devices because for Android devices, they don't have to get apps through the market. So you can basically put it on your device and send it to your friends in an email, or put it on the web, and without ever having to pay the $25 fee or deal with people at all.
Yeah. Now, working with the Android SDK, was there any part of it where you got stuck and then it took some time to get past it, and something that would be useful for our listeners to know about?
Well, so the SDK itself, I think, was fairly easy to install. One thing that's weird if you're an Ubuntu user specifically is that if you want to connect your device, so if you have an Android device, you can connect it to your computer and basically see all the debugging output that comes from it. And one thing that's a little weird if you're an Ubuntu user is that it doesn't sort of work out of the box. And there's something that you have to, let's see if I can find this. There's something that you actually have to change in like your Etsy settings or your USB settings. I should try to find that. Maybe I can send it to you for the show notes afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then you have to, I remember having to do the same thing for my Linux Mint distro, putting it into the etc, and I think it was like the initd 11 something or other.
Right.
Yeah, for the USB devices, and then you have to use root access in order to run the Android DB program.
Right. Yeah. So that's exactly right. It ends up you have to change the permissions for the USB.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that. So another thing that it's not really to do with the SDK, but it is more to do with like what people call the fragmentation of Android. That is a term that I think is really overused, but does have some implications. And one of which is that different devices have their storage in different places. Like some devices have the SD card, some have internal storage, and some have, and if none of that exists, like if you have a device that should have an SD card but it's missing or something.
Yeah, this was an issue, I remember you telling me about an issue that you ran into when writing your Droidian music program. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. So basically I'm saving the music to the SD card preferably, but if that doesn't exist, then the program needs to know what to do. And so like I had actually already released the program to the market, and people were complaining that we got the Droid Incredible actually that was shipped with no SD card, and they basically wanted, it didn't work. Like the downloads would just go nowhere, and I think they were actually being charged, maybe, which was a bad situation.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while. So I was just sort of assuming that the SD card existed. But the correct way is to not make any assumptions, and then there's basically an environment class in Android that you should basically use not just for the SD card, but to find out all sorts of things about the environment. And then if you use the environment class, and then there's a method called get external storage directory that basically will let you figure out where is the proper place to put to put music files, for example, or to put any sort of files that you're downloading.
Uh-huh.
And I think it'll even tell you if there's no storage available at all.
Okay. Yeah, and I know I remember you were also saying that you had some issues with the streaming function, and how did you work around that? And first of all, could you explain the problem that you encountered and how you solved it?
So this was a problem that was fine actually before Froyo, and so Froyo they actually did a lot of improvements,
Mm-hmm.
in most cases to the music APIs, I guess. And but what it did is it sort of broke streaming music apps. Like there's a lot of people complaining about the Pandora and Last.fm in particular, and then it broke my app in the sense that I had an option that you could sample audio files, and basically whenever you tried to put in samples on a Froyo device, it would sort of just sound tinny, I guess, and scrambled, and then eventually would just fail after about maybe 5-10 seconds. And so, to be honest, I never really resolved the problem with the streaming music, but my solution was to simply to change the method of caching, which is basically I just cached it directly to either the SD card or the internal storage.
Okay.
And then play the cached file.
Yeah.
Which is probably a better way to do it in the end anyway, rather than just using the play stream function.
Yeah. Well, that's the great thing about it is you can solve the problem several different ways.
Right. And I've been told it's actually been fixed in Gingerbread, but since I'm already happy with my solution, I don't think I'm gonna.
As long as nobody writes any more complaints, you're good, right?